Welcome back to the Win with Dice podcast, a podcast featuring members of the Win with Dice team. Although I don't have Ramon with me this week, I do have a special guest. Joining me is Claire.
Hello, my name's Claire.
Now, Claire just recently ran their first ever tabletop RPG session, and I'm very excited to get to talking about it. I think if you've been watching the gaming streams on the channel, you've definitely seen us talking about this. So I'm really excited to get into it. And there's a bunch of awesome art and pictures that we want to show. So there'll definitely be a bunch of those in the episode as you're watching this on YouTube or listening to this on YouTube. So definitely check those out. Yeah, again, very excited to get into this. But before we do that, we have to get to the most important part of the show. Which is, oh no, wait, I actually have to do all the... See, Ramon isn't here, and he usually does all the official Win with Dice intro stuff. This is a podcast about tabletop RPGs, running them and playing them. We'd like to talk about our games, other people's games, systems we've played in, or systems we haven't, sometimes. And just to have a casual discussion about running tabletop RPGs to sort of demystify it and decloak it a bit. So it doesn't seem as scary or complex as it might from the other side of the screen. And going along with that, I think it would be awesome to talk to a first-time DM. It's been a while since we've done that, so now, before we get into that part, we have to get to the most important part of the show, the Win with Dice weekly GM tip of the week. And this one is going to be brought to us by Claire, who was just mentioning off-screen or off recording about expecting the unexpected from your players.
Yeah, so because I have never DM'd before, I had about 40-ish pages of plot and story and ideas and everything like that, and I sort of had it in a specific order because I didn't know how to format notes, obviously. And right out of the gate, my party decided to go to the very end of my notes. I was expecting them to sort of stay on the first floor of the map, and they decided to go to the very top, which was basically like the end of my notes. So it was very disorienting right out of the gate. So I guess expect the unexpected. That's my main takeaway of being a DM for the first time. And also that, at least in my case, I didn't format my notes very well because I had never done it before, so I didn't really know what to expect. But I had maybe like 4 different text files open at the same time on my screen, and trying to juggle between all of them was very difficult. So if you can put everything in one text file, that is probably preferable in terms of how easy it is to keep track of stuff.
Yeah, you gotta figure out what like organizational system works for you, because like I know what works for me, but I don't know if that'll work for other people as well. But also, you did mention, and I'm gonna want to get into this as we get to talking about the game more. But like you mentioned how like all these notes you had, and I think that's a thing that's definitely a thing that a lot of first-time DMs or GMs do. Is they have like a lot of notes and stuff, and then sometimes something catches them by surprise, and like I mean that still happens. That happened to me like on a stream. That happened to me when I was running a game. I just thought the players would go right to the solution of blowing up the target thing that I had set out for them, but they decided to instead use their more social skills, which was a completely reasonable solution to the problem I created. I just hadn't expected them to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that doesn't go away.
Well, that's good to know as well.
I think one of my favorite instances of that is something just going out of left field in someone else's game. Is I don't know if you've watched any Critical Role, but it's basically D&D with a bunch of voice actors. And there was one session a long time ago where the DM was planning to run like this whole ship battle thing, but one of the players just used like this whirlpool spell to like instantly capsize the enemy ship. And it was hilarious and relatable. So again, that whole expect the unexpected thing will never go away.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's get into talking about your game, and let's just first introduce you. we'll just introduce you to our listeners out there. How much you want to say about yourself and maybe your history with playing tabletop RPGs?
So I have been interested in, I guess, role playing with friends, like in terms of writing, for most of my life. I feel like I started role playing when I was like maybe 11 or 12 years old. And that love of role playing as like a different character never really went away. In fact, it just got more intense as I got older. And for several years, I don't even know where or how I learned about D&D, but I was very interested in it, and I didn't have anyone to play with, so I just was trying to fill that void with role-playing with friends. And then I actually think it was last year, I was visiting Calvin, and he introduced me to Pathfinder.
Yeah.
And I made my first character and played in my first Pathfinder campaign, which I really enjoyed. And after that, I ended up moving to a new city. And on the subreddit for my city, there was someone asking for like, who wants to like make a D&D like group for the city, and I asked to join, and that's how I started playing D&D. I joined the Discord in, I believe it was the end of October or early November of last year, and I started playing last year in December for the first time with a group that I'm actually still playing with. Actually, tomorrow is my next game with them.
Nice.
And yeah, I have played pretty much every week. I did take a break in March this year for like maybe 2 months, just because there was a lot going on in my life. But I have made several characters now, and I really gravitate towards like spellcasters. My first character was a bard, so I really enjoy I guess being squishy and sort of staying out of battle, and like I really enjoy helping my party members with like spells that sort of buff them and stuff like that. I think I've used haste like several times now.
Yeah.
With my sorcerer. I love that meta magic to twin the spell. And yeah, so that's sort of like my experience with like tabletop role-playing games. I did play some board games like many years ago with a group in my town, but it was like a different game every week, and I didn't end up going very often anymore because it just was not really something I enjoyed with the group that I was playing with. It was like I was a young 20-year-old female-bodied person, and they were all like 30-year-old men, so it was very awkward for me. But yeah, so I really enjoy D&D. I find that it is very like therapeutic to sort of escape from my everyday life and playing these like magical characters that I would never be able to play in real life. Like be in real life, I guess. So yeah, that is probably like one of my favorite things to do now as like a hobby, and I'm excited that I got to be a DM for the first time as well. Like that was very exciting for me. So yeah.
Yeah, that's such a great thing about like these role-playing games. It's just like being able to step into these characters and just like emulate or be this different person for a few hours a week.
Yeah.
And just go on an adventure with all your friends.
Exactly.
Though I do gotta say, I'm partially jealous of the fact that you found a subreddit for your town and that they were looking for a D&D group on there. All that's on the subreddit of where I am is just like pictures of car crashes.
Yeah.
And yeah, also shout out to Haste because, you know.
It is a good spell.
Nothing more fun than just like flipping a switch on somebody and letting them go ham on the enemies.
Exactly.
So yes, you did recently run a game, and when I was asking about the system before, you said it was sort of D&D Lite. Can you describe that a bit?
Yeah. Yeah, so I am really only familiar with the D&D system. And as I was sort of coming up with this idea, actually earlier this year in like March, that's just when I started to think of like that I wanted to run my own sort of one-shot game. And I found out that there was like so many different systems that you can use. And I had no idea. I was like baffled. And so it's sort of like, I don't know, I guess it kind of freaked me out and like turned me off from using like a set system because there was just so many. I was overwhelmed. Yeah. So I decided, okay, I'm just gonna make everyone roll a d20 and that's that's it. So that's why I kind of call it like D&D Lite, because a few characters were able to roll a d6 to add onto another player's roll as like, I guess like guidance almost. And I think another character rolled a d4 and a d12 to like add to their rolls. And yeah, so mostly everyone, there was 6 players, and so everyone mostly just rolled a d20 to see if they like passed or failed the roll. And I sort of set like the checks. So basically, for example, there was one thing where if they went to a certain area in the map, if they rolled higher than an 11, then they were able to move on to like the next step. And so then if they investigated further, they had to roll higher than a 16 in order to be able to like find the clue. Right. So that was sort of how I managed the D20 rolling. And in some cases, it was like they had to roll higher than a 10, basically. Anything higher than a 10 would have passed the check, and then they were able to like find the clue. One character had like a specific character trait where he had to steal an item from the map, and so every time they entered a room, he was able to roll a d20, and depending on what number he got, I was able to tell him how many items were in the room that were able to be stolen, what the value were of the items, and where they were in the room. So if he rolled a nat 20, for example, he would find out exactly what items were in the room, where they were, and the exact amount of money. And if he rolled a nat 1, I would say there's no items in the room for him to steal, even if there were many, many items. And that actually happened, which was so funny. So yeah.
Yeah, I that's actually a really interesting concept for a system. It seems very lightweight, very easy to get into. I know you are completely right in that there are a lot of systems that you can learn and use, and some very lengthy ones with multiple, like hundreds of pages in the rule book.
Yeah.
And there's some that are just like one page, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a whole lot of variance there. I do wonder like what the easiest system to get someone into right off the bat is, and I don't even know if I'm sure about that. I think that's something that I haven't found yet, based on the systems that I use. So I think it's cool that you were able to build something that's, very, I guess, again, like lightweight. Like, there's not a whole like over encumbrance of rules to worry about. It's largely just that single die roll.
Yeah, exactly. And even so, like the few extra dice that people had, even that was like almost overwhelming. So I think like if I were to run it again with like a different group of people, I would definitely just keep it as a D20, because it was very difficult to keep track of everything. Like, I don't know how DMs do it. Like, props to my DM. Like, he is so excellent. So Ty, if you're listening. But yeah, so I definitely think I would just use like a d20, and that would be it for if I ever were to run this game again.
I mean, as far as how DMs do it, in my experience, it's mostly panic. But
I think my DM would say the same. Yeah.
All right, let's get into talking about the game itself. And I think I do want to put up some of the images of all the things you had, like the minis and stuff you had made for this, or the
Yeah.
How to describe like the models and everything that you were working on, because that was some really
Yeah,
awesome work.
I made 2 minis. One was like fully out of clay and it looks absolutely ridiculous, but it worked. And the second one I'm incredibly proud of. And it's actually a Barbie toy from the dollar store.
Nice.
I sort of X-Acto bladed bits and pieces off of her to sort of fit what I was looking for. And then I just added air dry clay to her base to make her dress, and then I painted her, and etc. etc. And I actually really love that mini because it fits perfectly in 2 inches like square across. So it was the perfect size because the character that the mini was was supposed to be like 12 feet tall. So it kind of worked that way. So yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, I did make like tiles and like floor tiles and wall tiles out of Jenga pieces.
Oh, interesting.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The floor tiles were like pieces of wood. All of this stuff came from the dollar store. I think altogether it came to like under $20, like everything that I needed, like supply wise. And there was like these like 4.5 by 4.5 inch like square tiles that were very thin, and I just put a layer of foam board on top, like I glued it on top, and then I carved with like I don't even know what tool it was. It was like a little ball point tool thing. And I carved like floorboards into it. Then I just painted it, and yeah, it was pretty simple. I'm actually giving it to my DM as a gift because he does so much for us. So yeah, but it was very simple. The only thing that like took a long time was waiting for it to dry. That was pretty much the only like time consuming aspect, because it had to sit for 24 hours to like for the glue to dry properly. But yeah, I feel like it fit perfectly because the Jenga tiles for the walls were 1/2 inch wide. So, and I think 3 inches long. And so it like fit perfectly in that like, because the tile was 4.5 inches, it fit perfectly in that 1/2 inch spot. So I could use that as like the wall line, I guess, in the floorboard. So yeah.
Yeah. That is like just super impressive that you're able to take like these dollar store things, because I just saw an ad for like all sorts of like tabletop terrain and tools and stuff. Yeah. And you're able to make something.
Go to the dollar store.
Put a little legwork in and a little elbow grease, and I mean, like what really gets me is how much you put into your first game that you've made it look so impressive. I know I didn't do that. I mean, I drew a map on a piece of paper that I think looked pretty good, but it certainly wasn't 3-dimensional.
Yeah, my DM actually, when he saw all the tiles, he was like, I can't ever DM again. And I felt so bad. Like, he has so many, like for his birthday this year, we got him like one of those books with like the plastic sheet, like floor tile things.
Yeah.
There's like 100 different floor tiles, and you can like flip them the other way for like a different tile and stuff. So we got like a bunch of stuff for him, and it just made me kind of laugh that like this is probably the most effort I will put into anything, including my future children. Like,
well, this is important. It's imagination.
Yeah, like this was like my huge project that I really wanted to get right, because I doubt I will ever put this much effort into anything ever again.
I mean, I just, again, I have to say, for your first game, you started off really well. Like this is why I really like to see people getting into running tabletop RPGs, because they always bring some new ideas or new things that just create like a whole new experience that like I might not have done, a DM I know might not have done, some of the DMs I don't even know might not have done, but you did that, and that was your thing that you brought into this tabletop RPG space that you shared with your friends. I think is really incredible. But yeah, let's get into the story of the game. Let's get into the recap or the setup.
Sure.
So what is the situation you've placed your players into?
So the game was called The Haunting of Willowvale Manor, and essentially it's set in the 1940s, and there was a family who used to live in the manor at the turn of the century, and the governess died mysteriously, and now the manor is presumed to be haunted. And so each character, I wrote everyone's character, just so it was easier for everyone, and for me.
Yeah.
And so there was the professor, who his goal was supposed to take a photo of the ghost, and he actually managed to. He rolled, I think, an 18, and which that meant like the picture was pretty much perfect. And he managed to at the very end of the game. Then there was the heir. So this was the character that actually lived at the manor when the governess died. It was his governess. Then there was the skeptic. She was a reporter. She was every time the ghost like appeared, she was conveniently distracted. So she never actually saw the ghost except the very end. And her goal was to write a news article about the haunting and the history of the house. Then there was the psychic, and she had to perform a seance at the end of the night, and sort of figure out what the ghost wanted, and like how to put the ghost to rest and stuff like that. And then there was the thief. He was pretending to be a prospective buyer of the manor because it was up for sale. And his goal was to steal at least one item from the house to basically like pawn off after the fact. And then there was the detective, and he actually was a child when the death happened, and he was very well aware of it, and that's how he got into becoming a detective, because he wanted to figure out what happened to the governess. And so his whole reason for being there was to figure out what happened, like really happened to the death of this character, because it was a very mysterious circumstance. The governess was found presumably murdered in the nursery, and she had written Lacrimosa on the floor beside her, and there was no real way of like how she was murdered, so it was very up in the air, and Scotland Yard was unable to figure out how she died, so the case was closed because there was no real idea who the killer could have been. And so I made a cast of NPC, just a cast of them with all punny names because I love puns. So there was Gil Thomas Mann, and he went by Gil T. Mann. So I thought that was very clever. There was Jennifer Ewan, and she went by Jenny, so it was Jenny Ewan, like genuine.
Okay.
There was Deirdre Dewitt, and she went by Dee Dee, so it was Dee Dee Dewitt, like Diddy Do It. There was the groundskeeper William McCate, and he went by Willie, so it was Willie Make It, basically. And who else? I think. And there was Evelyn Duns, but she went by Evie, so it was like her name was basically Evidence, like Evie Duns. And then like the main characters, the main NPCs had like normal names. But I had a lot of fun coming up with. It took me about 2 hours to come up with all those pun names because I wanted it to be like unique. Yeah, so the story, I guess, is that all these characters come together with their own reason for being at the manor, and they all none of them know each other. They are all new characters to each other, and they have to investigate the haunting, basically. Obviously, they had their own like mini quests that they had to complete during the evening, but the main goal was to figure out what the ghost wanted and how to put the ghost to rest. And it was a very eventful night because my party, I had set it up that they should probably go around the first floor. There was 3 floors in a house, plus an attic and a basement, and then the grounds of the manor. So there was quite a lot of area to cover, and my party decided, let's go right up to the 3rd floor, to the nursery, right out of the gate, the scene of the crime, and I was not expecting that at all. So I had to scramble to sort of figure out like where my notes were, etc., etc. But once I got into the swing of things, I felt a lot more comfortable. And it was very interesting to see how the characters interacted with one another, because I personally had no idea that at the end of the night, when the psychic was to perform the seance, I had written in my notes that if she can manage to get every single player to perform the seance with her, then she will be able to 100% be able to communicate with the ghost, because I had originally written sort of like a step-by-step guide on how to perform the seance, which we actually did. We turned off all the lights and had the candles
Oh,
lit.
in the actual room?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there were 3 candles. She had to roll a d20 3 times. If she hit above 10, the candle remained lit. But if she had below 10, one of the candles would be extinguished. And so if she had only 1 candle lit after the end of everything, the ghost would only be able to communicate by knocking, and the ghost might not be able to communicate accurately. With 2 candles, the ghost would be able to communicate with like 1 or 2 word replies. And if she had all 3 candles lit, so if she passed the check 3 times, then she would be able to communicate with the ghost fully, with full sentences, and with, for the most part, full accuracy. And she had to ask 4 questions. Why the ghost is haunting the estate, how to put the ghost to rest, who killed her or how she died, and who was responsible for the death. And I was completely shocked because my psychic player was able to get every single other player to join in the seance. And I had written in the character sheets certain characters would not be able to participate in the seance because they're too skeptical or too scared. And if the psychic managed to get that specific character to join the seance, she would get an automatic -2 to her roll, whatever it is, for each of the people that she has. So if she had a scared and a skeptical person, and then a third person who was neutral, she would get a -2 on 2 of the 3 rolls, basically. So I was very, very shocked when she managed to get every single person to join the seance.
So how did that happen then? Like how?
She asked the heir character to join the seance first, and he was actually a scared character, so he was not going to give her any sort of bonus to that. And he basically, the player said in character that, you know, he wants to figure out what happened to his governess because he's been living 40 years of his life not knowing what happened to her. And so then the two characters who were always going to join the seance said yes, they're going to join, and then the other characters, the other two characters, were like, well, if you guys are going to join, I guess we will too. So yeah, I was very surprised, and she was like ready to roll the d20, and I was like, you don't even need to, just light the candles. And she was like, oh my gosh. So it was, we were very crunched for time. We started at 7 p.m. and we ended at like just after midnight. So it was a very long game. I didn't expect it to be that long, and we didn't even get to everything. So
yeah,
that yeah. So I think if I were to run it again, I would definitely try and slot out like 6 or 7 hours, like probably in the afternoon we would start, just because there was just not enough time to get everything done. And I had a mechanic in the game where every half hour of real time that had passed, an hour in-game passed. And so I think it was 3 a.m. in the game by the time we did the seance. So it was like witching hour. So I thought that was very fitting, I guess, for the time that we did the seance. But yeah, my thief was able to steal quite a few items. He actually ended up raking up $18,000 worth of items.
Wow.
So he was doing excellent. And in one of the rooms, which had the most items, and I think the full amount in that single room was over $26,000 worth of items. He rolled a nat 1.
Oh.
So he was not able to even know that there were items in the room to steal. But then another character needed to have, I think he needed to be calmed down or something. And the thief offered to calm him down. So I said, sure, roll a d20 to see how well you can calm the character down. He rolled a nat 20. So I was like, you know what? While you're helping him, you notice something that you can steal. So he was able to steal that item as well. Just because I felt kind of bad that he rolled a nat 1 where it was supposed to count. And then for like a completely unrelated roll, he rolled a nat 20. So I was like, okay, you can steal an item.
Yeah, dice are fickle like that.
Yeah. It was really a funny situation, and at one point, because it was sort of set in like vague UK area, we all had various accents, and a lot of the characters were like Irish for some reason, and so at one point they were in a room with a patio attached to it, and I said, you can find like the one character, the detective, every in-game hour had to smoke a cigarette because he has a nicotine addiction. And so he had to find an open window or step outside. And so, and if he didn't, the next hour he would have a -2 to every roll. So he asked if he could see like any window or door that he could open to step outside. And I was like, oh yeah, you can see that there's a patio door. And everyone paused, and then we all burst into like tears. We were laughing so hard because one player was like, oh, whose patio door? As in like Patty O'Dore. And it was so funny. And we actually just like, we were laughing for like 5 minutes. It was hilarious. And I recorded the entire game, so I do have the audio recording of the night, so I'm very pleased about that because there were so many funny points during the evening that wasn't even the only pun that happened. There was another one, and I can't remember now what it was, but we were also howling. It was just so silly. But I think patio door was like, I can't say patio door now without thinking it's a person's name. So,
that should definitely be in. That should definitely be the next pun name you include.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, we were actually joking about that if I like end up running my own D&D campaign, that there will definitely be like a recurring NPC named Patio Door.
I am very
Just
excited.
because it was so silly.
So, something you mentioned that I wanted to sort of press on a bit because I thought it was interesting. You did have, like, everybody had the goal of, like, wanting to investigate the place and all of that, but everybody had their own individual things they also wanted to do. I was wondering if, like, at first, were the other players aware of what the other characters' goals were? Or was it just the player
No.
themselves? Yeah. Yes.
No one knew anything else. I specifically told them, keep everything close to your chest. It is complete surprise as to who your characters are in terms of personality.
Nice.
The only thing is that you know the character's name and their role, because you would have heard sort of through the grapevine who was attending the investigation.
Mm-hmm.
So every character had their own character sheet, and they were not allowed to tell anyone else what their sheet said. So every character basically was there to investigate, but then they had their own like secret thing that no one else knew about. So that was very fun for me as a DM to see how they interacted with one another, because I gave them the option to tell each other about their characters, but most of them sort of kept everything close to their chest. And for example, the detective character, he would get sort of an anonymous message from me every time the characters entered a room with clues in it. I would say the hairs on the back of your necks rise. So it was sort of like a general, everyone would hear that message, but only the detective knew that was a secret code, I guess, just for him. And he was very, I guess the word would be like nonchalant about it. He sort of kept it very close to himself in that regard, and I thought that was very, I enjoyed that a lot, that the characters sort of, or I guess the players kept their characters like close to them, that they didn't share too much with each other.
That's a really fun idea, though. Like I like how, because again, like in a longer term campaign, you probably would have something similar to that, where everybody has their own individual things their character wants to do, but there's a larger overall goal. I like that you compressed it into like this murder mystery.
Yeah.
So did they solve the mystery with this seance? Were they able to figure out what happened?
Yes, they actually solved it like 75%. I had all these different NPCs that sort of had a motive and had a reason to have killed the governess. There was like a love triangle going on, there was jealousy, there was inheritance, all this sort of stuff. And the I guess the spoilers.
It depends on how much you want to spoil. I don't know if you'll use this again, so how much you want to spoil is up to you.
I'm okay with saying okay. the ending. But the governess was actually having an affair with the lady of the house, and she was a single woman, and back then she was 32, unmarried, so there was probably something wrong with her. Unfortunately, that's the society back then.
Yeah.
And so the governess was being poisoned by the maid because the lady of the house had encouraged her to sort of be courted by a guilty man, the gardener, to keep up appearances that suspicion would be cast off of them, because back then it wasn't really socially acceptable to be gay.
Right.
So, and as a gay person myself, I wanted to include a queer love story. The maid was poisoning her, and so she was getting sicker and sicker, but and the housekeeper had sort of raised the lady of the house when she was younger, And the lady of the house also has a twin sister who was very angry at the lady of the house because she knew of the love affair and she didn't want it to continue because she wanted her to marry a doctor down the road to sort of keep the family name going. And so the governess planned on leaving to Paris because in the late 1800s there were salons in Paris where queer men and women were able to sort of socialize, and it was acceptable there to be who you are. And so that's why the governess wanted to go to Paris with the lady of the house to live freely, or at least more free. And the lady of the house didn't want to because she still sort of was stuck in the mentality of, I am the only one who can carry on this family name now that my sister has married someone else, and so she's taken the husband's name. So at the very last day of the governess's life, she was out in the garden, or I guess first she broke up with the gardener, and she broke his heart. So he was very angry because she wouldn't tell him why. So he strangled her. And the heir, who was 5 years old at the time, entered the room and saw it happen. So the gardener stopped midway through and ran off. And at the same time, the housekeeper was in the room directly above, which there was a staircase from the nursery up to the schoolroom. So she was upstairs listening to this because she actually planned on strangling the governess herself. Because she was jealous of the relationship that the lady of the house and the governess had. And so there was a lot of murder going on, murder ideas. And so the governess goes out into the garden to have a picnic, and the maid poisons her tea for a final time, which proves fatal because it ends up raining really hard out of nowhere, and the air runs through the gardens, so he's all muddy, and he runs into the house, and she tries to chase him. But she, because of the poison, she has trouble breathing. I looked up like different effects and symptoms and stuff of being poisoned slowly over time, and labored breathing was like one of the main symptoms of strychnine poisoning, which was in rat poison at the turn of the century. She runs after the heir, trying to stop him from dragging mud through all the house, and she ends up in the nursery with the heir, and she at that point is having an asthma attack. And I personally have asthma and have had several asthma attacks when I was very young, so I know how scary it is. So I incorporated that into the way that the ghost died, actually. The governess died, rather. So she ends up having an asthma attack because the poison has sort of weakened her lungs to a point where she is unable to breathe now after being exhausted of running after a 5-year-old. So she dies, unfortunately, of an asthma attack. So it was no one's fault in the end. And the lady of the house had agreed sort of with herself that, okay, I'm going to go to Paris with the governess. And then she finds out that she's dead. So she's heartbroken, obviously. She's just absolutely distraught. And after the funeral for the governess, the lady of the house, her sister, comes to take away the heir because she obviously can't take care of a child now. She's just not well enough. And they argue at the top of the stairs because the lady of the house says, I can't live without her because I was supposed to go to Paris with her and I was too late. Now I will live the rest of my life completely in grief and mourning because the love of my life is dead and it was my fault that I didn't go with her. So the two of them fight, and the the sister actually pushes the lady of the house down the stairs, and she breaks her neck and dies.
Wow.
So, yeah, and she buries her in the garden, in like their special picnic spot that they had as girls. And yeah, so my party was very surprised to see a second ghost because I had that second mini. So they only thought there was one ghost, and it was actually a very late addition to the plot. But it was postponed. My game was postponed by a week because a party member had a last-minute family emergency, so we postponed it, and I was able to sort of like craft in this extra added stuff about the second ghost. And yeah, so the party figured out that yes, she was being poisoned, but it didn't kill her. And yes, the gardener did try and strangle her, but didn't kill her. And then the third aspect was that the sister wanted to kill her, to kill the lady of the house for all the inheritance and like getting the house and everything else. So they were like mostly correct, because when we did the seance, the psychic asked the ghost like who's responsible for your death, and the ghost said God, because she died by natural causes basically. So
Right.
and yeah, the party figured out, well, if she said God, that means it's like natural causes. So, and the word that she had written beside her was lacrimosa. That is a part, it's about like a 4-minute part of a, I don't know, I guess a music composition, I think by Mozart, called Requiem. And that specific part is basically, it's all in Latin, the words, and lacrimosa means mournful. So that part was like, that song, I guess, was very prevalent throughout the game. Every time there was like a flashback, I would play that song, because the lyrics in English are basically translated like, he's guilty, but like, spare him, Jesus, and etc., etc. Like, it's a very like religious sort of song. And yeah, so she wrote lacrimosa because she's just mournful that like she knows she's going to die, and she can't be with the love of her life. So at the end, they actually do bury the body, like the bones of the lady of the house, beside the governess, and so they're able to be together in death. And both their ghosts sort of were able to be together in like the afterlife, I guess.
Oh, that's
So
pretty
there was
sweet.
sort of a happy ending.
Yeah, bit of a bit of a lot going on, a lot of strangulation and poisoning and falling downstairs. But yeah, I guess that's sort of a bittersweet in a way, but a happier ending.
Yeah, I wanted like a lot of red herrings, so I thought, because I just love red herrings in stories. I mean, even on your stream for Outer Worlds, like the DLC that was a huge inspiration, I will not lie.
I was gonna mention, I don't want to say too much because I want people to play that for themselves, but yeah, there was a bit of a murder mystery in there, and there was a lot of like different hints and red herrings and different suspects and everything there.
Yeah, red herrings are like my favorite thing in books, because it just I usually like figure out the plot twist, and so when there's red herrings, it like makes it a lot more difficult, and I love it, just to like to sink my teeth into a mystery like that. It makes me feel a lot more engaged with the story if I'm sort of caught off guard. So I'm very pleased that my party was able to sort of look past those red herrings, but they were completely fooled all throughout the game. Like, they had no idea at all. There were secret letters from the governess to the lady of the house, and they used like code names. If anyone is familiar with the novel Jane Eyre, Jane and Mr. Rochester are basically that. Jane is a governess, and Mr. Rochester is like the man of the house. And so the letters were the code names of Jane and Rochester. So everyone thought that it was a man character. And so no one knew that it was actually the lady of the house. until they found a burnt letter from the governess to the lady of the house saying, you can marry the doctor and have your lavender wedding, which is a queer term. It was basically when two queer people get married just for appearance's sake. So socially they're acceptable because it is a man and a woman, even though they're both queer people. So the governess sort of made that aware, and lavender was a prevalent flower throughout the game as well. So they were able to slowly piece things together once they found those clues. And I really, really enjoyed watching their thought process. I don't know if maybe that's like strange to say, but just to try and like, I knew everything, what was going on, and to see my players sort of like have no idea what they're stepping into. I really enjoyed sort of the omniscient presence I had as DM.
Yeah.
Like it was very exhilarating, like to see what are they going to do next. I wonder, are they going to piece it together? Are they going to be completely like think of like the opposite thing, like they're going to just completely misread it or what? And it was just very fun to sort of sit at the head of the table and watch all of them communicate and work together to figure out a mystery that I had made. Like I don't know, and I am a writer, but I've never really let anyone interact with my writing before, so
Yeah.
it was very interesting to have my friends sort of just say like, wow, the story was so like amazing, there was so many plot twists. Like it really made me feel good, like as a creative person, to like have that feedback. And I would definitely be a DM again, I think, because I had so much fun. It's like addictive almost.
It really is. It's been so long for me, and I'm just like, I'm stressed because I want to do it, but I'm so impressed by this. The fact that you went into your first time running a game with a mystery of all things.
Yeah. You know, go big or go home, you know what I mean?
Right? So something I'm wondering then, so like what would you say is something you got from this game that you would apply to future like game mastering? Like if you were to run more games in the future, what's something that you've learned here that you'd want to definitely apply? Because I think you've done a lot of great work and stuff here, so I'm wondering like what are you going to be thinking the next time you're preparing for a game?
Under prepare.
Yeah.
I think that's my main takeaway from this. I spent 3 weeks, basically 8-hour days every single day, prepping for this freaking game, and it was like so intense. The painting, the making the mini, the typing alone, like it was like at least 40 odd pages of notes. And I barely got to most of it, so yeah. I think I will definitely do more theater of the mind stuff in terms of like physical like tiles and stuff, and also in terms of like writing out the prep for like the next session. It will not be as in-depth as it was because it was so much work, and I am still kind of burnt out from all of that work.
Yeah.
But definitely I will not be preparing as much as I did. I might just do jot notes and sort of improvise from there because it's just a lot. And actually my DM of my campaign that I'm playing in, I asked him for help on terms of like how to prep for the one shot, and he said his like biggest tip was, you know, you might write 35 pages of prep, and then the party will spend the entire session on the first half page of your prep just talking to a barmaid that's cute. Yeah. And not get to any of the story. So yeah, I think I'll definitely just be writing vague jot notes and like plot points that I would like to expand on if the party goes in that direction. Because it was so much work, and I feel like not as much as I would have liked was covered. So like they completely avoided the basement and the grounds, and so they I had to force them to go to certain places, which was like sort of a mechanic I found on Reddit actually, on like one of the D&D subreddits, on like haunted house stuff, where they would open a door to one room and I would sort of force them into a different room somewhere else completely in the house if they needed to like get that clue first, because I was pressed for time. So I had to sort of force them to like, I had a text file called brute force plot device, where I would force them into going to a certain room to get a certain clue. But yeah, definitely will not prepare as much for my next my next thing.
Yeah, that's something that comes up a lot in terms of RPG advice, is like don't over prep. But that's such a vague thing to say, because like over prep for one person might be different compared to another person, right? So
yeah, exactly.
And even in terms of like with what you've made, maybe if you had been going into like a longer term campaign or a longer term game, maybe some of that stuff could still be usable. I mean, a lot of it was very specific, but you know, sometimes when you over prepare things, you still have stuff that can be used in the future with, you know, different characters and settings and situations, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's always hard to gauge what over preparing is, but I think it's a thing that you just figure out with experience, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that I would like to run another one shot, like probably from like the game rulebook sort of thing, like the pre-made campaigns, just because I would like more experience doing just shorter things before I like delve into a full campaign. And also I'm just very intimidated because my DM has like this huge like lore. He made a map of the like area, like it's just a huge thing going on. And I mean, we've been playing for almost a year now, so there's a lot going into it, and we're actually doing a one shot tomorrow with different characters, but it's like related to our actual campaign. So he's like putting so much work into it, and then there are 2 other DMs on our like city D&D Discord server, I guess, and one of them has a complete homebrew game that uses like the D&D mechanics, but it's like completely homebrew, like everything. He was allowing homebrew classes and races. Like he is doing so much work. And the other one, I think he was just doing like a not really a one shot, but like maybe there was like 3 sessions. Like it was very like contained, and he created the entire world himself and like the lore and everything. So I feel very intimidated to try and like get players to join my, like, I'm a baby DM, please join my game, I don't know what I'm doing. You probably know more than me.
I mean, I would say you've already made a very good impression with the with your players at least, and hopefully they're telling other people about it. So whatever you start with, I'm sure people will enjoy it.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
I would like to, like, that's my end goal, is for next year, at least at some point next year, to be a DM of my own campaign, because I feel like we have so many players in our server that have not been able to join a game yet. So I would like to sort of open it up to more players. And even if it's just like 4 people, you know, something manageable. Like, I mean, in my campaign that I'm a part of, there's 6 players, so it is quite a packed group. But yeah, hopefully I will be able to get my own campaign up and running eventually. I have a few ideas for sort of like plot ideas and stuff, and like you said, like the stuff that I didn't get to use in my one shot, I will definitely be using it in a campaign if there's like a spooky episode, because I ended up writing like instances where the ghost sort of appears, and it actually like scared me, the writer. I had to sleep with a nightlight on that night because it actually did kind of scare me a little bit. and I never got to use any of it. So it sort of like made me disappointed that I wrote these scary things and my players didn't really even get to hear like the description of like the ghost and everything like that. But when I did introduce the ghost, it was sort of improv, and they were still like absolutely terrified. So I was glad for that. At least I know like on my feet I can I can come up with something spooky. But yeah, I really enjoyed being a DM, and hopefully I will run my own campaign one day. That's the goal.
Well, whenever you do, I would be extremely happy to have you on again, because I'm very excited for wherever your GMing journey is going to go next.
Yeah, for sure. I will let you know.
Okay, is there anything else you want to add on before we head into the end of the episode? We did talk about a lot today, and again, I think it was a very fascinating conversation. I like hearing everything you got into in your first time running a game, and I don't know, I can't wait to see what else you do next. Is there anything else you want to mention about your game or your future plans before we head into the end of this podcast episode?
I guess I didn't really mention the way that I like did the flashback mechanics.
Oh.
I am shameless, and I took it from the Batman like detective mode of like where you're able to like rewind the video, I guess. I don't know like what aspect that was in the game, but I thought that was very interesting, and so I sort of like shamelessly stole that. So every time the characters entered a room in the house, there was a flashback that sort of added on to the lore and the mystery. So I sort of did like a light version of that, where it was just a small scene of like the characters when they were still alive, at various points in their life, to sort of give backstory to the characters, because I didn't actually play any of the NPCs. They were all a part of the flashbacks.
Oh.
So yeah, so the characters were the only, like, the player characters rather were the only ones really there interacting with everything, and the NPCs were sort of just like flashback. Like every time they entered a room, I would say like, oh, there's a fog that shimmers over the room, and in the corner of the room you see a woman sitting in a chair, and then the flashback starts. Yeah, that was basically how I incorporated the NPCs into like tell the story, I guess, without like giving anything away, because it was all vague sort of snapshots of of scenes, like little snippets of windows into the characters' lives when they were still alive, I guess. I didn't know how to incorporate 40 years going by, because most of the characters would be dead of old age. So and there was no reason for the NPCs to still be at the house when it had been abandoned for 40 years. So yeah, I thought that the flashback was really the only method I could use to sort of incorporate them and be able to tell the story at the same time. But yeah, I definitely will have fun playing like actual NPCs that interact with the characters whenever I end up being a DM for my own campaign, because I just love like putting on different voices and accents and stuff. That
is the best
yeah,
part.
that right? It is. It's so good. I had so much fun.
I do have to say, round these parts, we advocate for stealing good ideas and using them in your games. So.
Good. It's not like a self-report or anything that I'm like stealing from here and there.
No, I always borrow. Well. Aggressively borrow great ideas, because when you mix it together with everything you're coming up with and the improv nature of a tabletop RPG game, it's going to end up being something different anyways, in most cases.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Well, I think that's gonna do it for us today. Definitely down below in the comments section, everybody who's listening to this, if you want to drop some details or anything about maybe your first time running a game or what you would want to do for your first time running a game, just feel free to drop those comments and ideas down below. I do want to see what other people's experiences were like and other suggestions they may have for other new GMs and DMs out there. And Claire, I just want to thank you again for coming and hanging out for an hour and talking about this awesome game of yours.
Thank you for having me. I was like really touched that you invited me on. This is my first podcast appearance, so I was very I was like telling everyone like, oh my god, I'm gonna be on my best friend's podcast. So yeah, I was very excited, and I really deeply appreciate that you had me on to let me talk about my game for however long.
I mean, to be fair, I would have done this without the podcast anyway, because I would have wanted to know everything about your game. This is just a chance to, like, do it out loud. And then
yeah.
let people hear it.
Well, thank you anyway. I really had a lot of fun sort of talking about all the events that happened, so I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, for everyone who is listening out there, if you want to hear more of the podcast, we've got a whole bunch of episodes where we cover a whole bunch of different games, including Lancer, Pathfinder, all that sort of thing. So just be sure to follow the channel as well. If you're interested in live gaming streams, check those out. We've got Batman, and Skyrim, and Dead Space, and Mass Effect will be back soon. I do also want to give a shout out to all the people we have linked below in the description of this video. There's a whole lot of cool Lancer RPG stuff from people we've talked to, including Vex, who we talked to recently about their new Kickstarter for the In Golden Flame Act 1 campaign. So definitely check that out. It has some really great NPCs in there. Also, of course, I want to give a shout out to the Untold Stories project, where I'm at on Mondays and Tuesdays, playing in their Starhaven superhero space game and the Gemstars Magical Girls Fantasy World game. They're very different and very fun, and a lot of things are kicking off. Starhaven is actually going to mean the last couple of episodes. By the time this comes out, there'll be one episode of Starhaven left, so definitely swing by for the finale. It's going to be big, I hope. Hopefully I live through it and don't get eaten by some sort of space creature. But that is going to be the episode for this week. So for all of our mysterious and ghostly GMs and DMs and players and everybody else out there, just remember to keep on winning with dice, and we'll see you next time.